Okay, I'll show the step here on the creating the mapping graph, which can be useful for certain applications. So let's look here. Create mapping. There we go, create mapping graph. We'll add this, and you should all be used to me flying through some of this stuff by now. So what I'm doing is I'm going to move this over here for the create mapping graph. The mapping graph needs a reads track from the local realignment, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take that mapping graph and output it to the create tracks list. And as we saw before, which is something that didn't happen the first time I was doing this, but maybe I can annotate this video later as to why this is a feature, that in order to be on the track list, it also has to be an output. So what we can do here is say tracks input mapping graph. That's configured. This will stay the same. So what we've done is, to the analysis we did before, we're going to add an additional track called the mapping track, and I'll show you how that varies. So here we'll very quickly file, save as, let's go to workflow, step 10 mapping graph. Okay, validation successful, and let's go and run this. Select our reads. Next. Everybody's familiar with this workflow. It helps to see it several times though. Results, new folder, step 10, mapping graph. And finish. Be back with you in a few minutes, but it'll be a few seconds on the video. Okay, that is finished now. Let's close step 9, and we have step 10 mapping graph, and we'll see when we look at the track list how this has changed. Okay, so we have the variant, and you can see how this is how it takes some time to render, and this is what the mapping graph is useful for. Instead of having this rendering in order to see the coverage graph, now it just becomes a graph that renders very, very quickly, and it's easier to look at when you have a lot of specimens and you're trying to see if you have any problems, say with primers dropping out or something like that, and you're not particularly going to look at variants. So that's what the mapping graph looks like right there, and you can see how it's the similar profiles up here, but it doesn't have to be re-rendered every time that you move things around. So it's a nice feature depending upon how you want to look at your results. Like I said, if you're going to go in and you want to look at individual calls, you really want those reads there because it's not very informative on the mapping graph. But if it's not important to have these reads, then the mapping graph will be much faster. Okay, so let's close that down. And now we're starting to get a little busy here, so I'm going to do a little bit of neatening up real quick before we move to the next video. But let's move these over here so we could see where our reference inputs are going. Let's create a little bit of space here. The one thing I don't like is to use the auto arrange. Where is that? Yeah, I believe it's if you right click, you can have this layout and it does some kind of auto layout. I'm not a big fan of that. I prefer just to manually move it around, and I don't like it when others go into my workflows and accidentally rearrange things because it could be hard to really understand what's going on. Okay, so we have all those mapping tracks. This is our main output, and what we're going to move to next are two final features of single specimen analysis, and that's going to be extracting the consensus sequence and then some of our QC mapping reports and statistics table. So, see you in a few.